he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Dog wouldn't get out of the car. We split up into what we call night ops teams. 2 sightings with a thermal camera and 1 during the daylight without a thermal. Well, let me start first with the most recent one. That was the one that I saw during the daylight. Actually, I was in the northern part of Kentucky with another group. That was the Tom Shea's Northern Kentucky Bigfoot Research Group. And we were out camping for the weekend. And we were actually sitting around the fire late last fall. And as we were sitting there talking, we were kind of sitting in a circle where we were facing each other. And as I was looking across at the person who was sitting across from me, I happened to notice out in the woods, there was a small clearing, and not a very large clearing, but there was shadows under the canopy to my right, shadows under the canopy to my left, with a little clearing in between where the sunlight was beating through. At that time, I saw something that was that appeared to be quite large. It was on 2 legs, very dark black. In the sunlight, I would say that its hair was actually almost like glistening. I then told the rest of the group what I'd seen. The sighting only lasted about 3 seconds because it was during the time that it was going from the shadows on my right into the shadows on the left when it just passed briefly through that sunlight. I told them what I had just seen, and immediately we started looking around to see who was missing from our group. The only one that was actually missing was my youngest son, whose name is Wes. So then we started inquiring as to where Wes was at the present and what he might have been wearing when he left. The last he had been seen, he was walking down this trail that would have went from my right, circled around, and then would have come back to our base camp on the left. At the time that he left, no one was certain what he was wearing. So Tom Shea and Ben Taylor, they got in a side by side and took off to go find my son. Well, they found him and had asked him to come back to base camp. So he came back to base camp. Well, when he came back, he was wearing a pair of light gray colored shorts and a light gray colored sleeveless t-shirt. So it was obvious that it wasn't him that I had seen. He and Jan then took a walkie-talkie with an orange shirt and a stick, and they went down to the approximate area where I'd seen what I thought was a Bigfoot. I had the other walkie-talkie and was directing them as to where to go and where to stand. I got Wes in position. He had that stick and the orange shirt. He tied the orange shirt on top of the stick so I could see clearly. Once I got him in position, he started raising the stick to the point where I said the Bigfoot's head was. It was then that he determined that the individual had to be about 8 foot tall for its head to reach up as high as what I had seen it. He and Jan then came back to base camp. So that was, I guess, the only sighting that I had during the daytime. The other 2 that I had at night, the first one was actually in a location here in southern Ohio. We were out on a BFRO expedition in 2019, and the night ops group that I was leading had, I think, about 7 people in it, something like that. We had set up again in a circle. We were facing each other. This was at night. We did have a various array of thermals and night vision. One of the individuals in the group thought that they saw a Bigfoot, which would have, at that time, it was been directly behind me. We then started using everyone was using thermals and so forth to try to see. I wasn't able to see the thing for quite a while, but finally, when I did, I could tell that it was standing behind a tree, peeking out from behind this tree. It had been, I assume it was the same creature, don't know, but it had been throwing acorns at us later, then threw a rock and actually hit one of the vehicles that we had driven out there. But I think 5 of the 7 members of our night ops team were able to see it on that occasion. Since then, I've placed what we call long duration recorders, or LDRs, out in that location, and have gotten some great audio over the past 3 or 4 years in that place. The last sighting that I'll tell you about was actually the second sighting. It took place about a week later, but again was back down at the Kentucky location that I was telling you about sooner, and it lasted for a lot longer. I was sitting in a gravity recliner at the edge of our perimeter of our base camp, while most of the other individuals were over sitting around the campfire talking and things of that nature. Some people had already turned in for the night and gone to bed. Well, it got to be about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, well, I better scan the perimeter one more time, because it was getting a little cool, and I was going to cover up with my sleeping bag, not get in it, but actually just use it as a blanket and cover up with it. And I was afraid I might get sleepy and fall asleep. So using my thermal, I started scanning the perimeter, starting to my right, and then swept around to my left. And about my 10 o'clock position, I spotted something off in the distance. With the thermal, it's kind of hard to tell how far away it is and how large it is. But I spotted this thing that looked like a Bigfoot, or as it's described by many people, with a broad chest, shoulders, kind of a somewhat conical head. And I noticed this thing from the chest up. I couldn't see anything below its chest. So I kind of assumed that it was sitting out in the weeds or something somewhere, or behind a bush or somewhere I couldn't see the rest of it. But as I kept watching this thing, it never moved, which really seemed strange to me. I watched and watched and watched, and it didn't move. So after about 30 minutes, I called for Tom, who was sitting over at the campfire, and said, Tom, come over here and check this out a minute. So he came over, and he got out his night vision, and I said, look off to my 10 o'clock. And I said, there's something over there that's shaped kind of like a Bigfoot from the chest up. But I said, I've been watching it for a half hour, and the thing has never moved. And so he started watching, and he saw it too with his night vision. And he happened to comment that, about that time it started moving. I started watching also, and had started moving. It then, with the two of us watching it, it began crawling from where it was at over behind 2 trees. And once it got behind these 2 trees, we couldn't see it again. We kept watching. And after just a few minutes, it started crawling from that spot over behind 2 other trees. Well, by this time, about 3 other members of our group, John Gregory Drozovich, Ben Taylor, and his dad, Rich Taylor, had heard us talking. And so they came over to see what the excitement was, and they got out their thermals and started watching also. Well, the last 2 trees that it had crawled up behind, it started moving from those 2 trees up toward a tree that we could tell was closer to us. But again, at that time, we couldn't tell how far away it was. It got behind that tree, and we watched again until about 4 o'clock in the morning. So altogether, it was about 4 hours, and we didn't see it move again. It never came out from behind that tree. So we were kind of perplexed as to what happened to it. So the next morning, we got up early to go out and look for tracks about the time it was getting daylight and to see if we could determine what had happened to this individual. We first found out that the spot I have first seen it at, there was an old rotted stump that was sitting right on a dry creek bank in front of us. And I would guess it's probably about 40 yards away, something like that. That's where I first spotted it. Then it started crawling to the first two trees, and the second two trees. When it ended up behind the last tree where we kind of lost it, we discovered that it probably didn't actually crawl up behind that tree. Right behind that tree was a branch of that dry creek bank. And we think what happened was it actually crawled down in that creek bank and then crawled out without us seeing which way it went. So it actually wasn't hiding behind the tree. It actually got into that dry creek bank and got away. But altogether, I was watching it from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock a.m. And actually had it in sight for probably a half hour to 45 minutes or so of that time. Then when it got behind that last tree and into that creek bank, that's when we lost it. Was, and we actually measured the next day. I forgot to include that. And that last tree or creek bank that it got up behind or got into that creek bank was only about 40 feet from us. So it got quite close. One of the other strange things that we discovered in watching this thing, I'm trying to think how this went. It was, as it was crawling, of course, it was on all fours. Its back legs were kind of splayed like a frog would do. And quite an uncomfortable position for a human to try to get in and stay in very long. But also it had its right fist closed, its left hand was open, and those fingers were kind of splayed apart. But in the right hand, the fist that it had closed, it was clutching kind of a short, I would guess, maybe 10 inches or 12 inches, what appeared to be a pointed object, similar to maybe a sharpened stick or something of that nature, but it was clutching this thing in its right fist. And part of the bottom of it was protruding from the right side of its fist, while the pointed part was protruding over from the left side, like where the thumb would be.
Any idea what that would be used for?
Not unless it was using it for digging. That would be our first guess, is that it was using to dig either roots or tubers or freshwater mussels or something of that nature. We really don't know, but it definitely had this thing in its hand and was clutching it in its fist and was crawling with that fist closed and the other hand open.
Have you ever heard of any kind of thing like that before in any other research?
Yeah, I've heard other people mention seeing them carrying sticks, of course, various lengths and things like that. I have heard in some situations of them digging, of course. And there's no reason, I guess, not to believe that they might use some simple tools, much as we do, to dig or to make their work a little easier if possible. So it's very possible that that's what it was using that stick for, was to dig with. I've never heard anybody mention a half hour, but I have heard people, talking about, seeing Bigfoots that didn't move, that held still. And what I personally think, I think it was sitting up there or sitting there watching us. And who knows how long it had been there, watching us, and especially me, because I was sitting at the edge of base camp. I was the closest. So it's hard to tell. It could have been sitting there since dark, watching us carefully. I don't know, but it was kind of funny that once Todd came over and started observing it also, that's finally when it decided to move. And in its effort to move, crawl, it kept crawling closer and closer to us. It was trying to get closer, and whether that was for a closer observation or why, or it knew that dry creek bed was there, and it was simply trying to get closer to it. I don't know. But since it was sitting behind that rotted stump right on the creek bank, it could have easily gotten away that way had that been what its intent was. The creek bank ran right in front of that stump, so it could have easily crawled down in it at that point and been gone, and we wouldn't have seen it anymore. So I think its intent was for some reason to get closer to us, whether that to be to observe us better, or it was just kind of a game it was playing to see how close it could actually get. We didn't see any other signs of any other Bigfoots, but a lot of times, people will say, where there's one, there's another. So that's a possibility, I guess, that there was another one somewhere around that we didn't see. And it could have been playing, like I said, a kind of a game of chicken to see, on a dare to see if it was able to get closer to us than the other one did. Who knows? But I have had a recorder out down there off and on for the last few years, and have gotten some great audio out of that area.
Describe what you got.
I've gotten whoops. I've gotten at times screams. I've gotten certainly wood knocks, things of that nature. Also some tapping sounds, clacking sounds like rock on rock, sometimes rocks on trees, broken branches and trees, and what sounds like rocks being thrown against a tree. Trying to think, there have been times when I've got what kind of sounded like what I'll describe as gibberish, almost like baby gibberish. And this is out in a private woods owned by an individual that lets us go there. He doesn't allow anybody else on his property. There aren't any houses real close to that area. So I don't believe it's actually coming from a human, but it almost sounds like baby gibberish. I was described as being in the distance, but that just means, farther than probably 10 yards away from my recorder, but not that far because the recorder picked it up. So it had to be close enough that it could hear, but it was just almost like a type, kind of a sound, only, much higher pitched. And so that was unusual. Also, there have been times I've picked up what kind of sounded like people talking, but almost just far enough away that you couldn't understand what they were saying, but also not in any intelligible English. So, again, no idea what that might be. But I have picked up at times what sounded like at least two individuals in the area, because I could hear what appeared to be one doing one thing while there was another. I used an LDR that we built ourselves. It has stereo microphones in it. So I'm able to tell what direction it's coming from and relatively how close it is. So I've picked up what appears to be at least two individuals there at the same time, one a little closer than the other, and on opposite sides of the recorder. So there had to be, if in fact there were Bigfoots, there had to be at least two of them on those occasions. The one with the gibberish definitely sounded like a child. It had a high-pitched voice, and like I said, it just kind of sounded like baby babble. It wasn't loud, it wasn't booming or anything. Many times people have described, especially male Bigfoots, as having a very low guttural type growl or something of that nature, which they could actually, the human hearing it could actually feel in their chest. And it wasn't anything like that. This was definitely something that was high pitched, and it just put me in the mind of maybe a small toddler or something like that. If it was a human, something in the nature of, say, 2 to 3 years old.
Okay, so
That's the firsthand experience. I do put out recorders, me and my son, over different parts of the state of Ohio and the northern part of Kentucky, and have gotten hours and hours of audio, which I have saved on my computer. And I couldn't guess how many. I mean, it would literally be thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of audio collected.
so you mostly work audio. You don't do trail cams or anything of that nature.
I don't put out trail cams. I do have friends that do. My experience with that is just that it hasn't been very successful. For whatever reason, they seem to appear to know what a camera is, and they kind of shun those and do their best not to get caught in front of one. Where with the audio recorders that I put out, the digital audio recorders, they don't seem to mind those so much. Sometimes they seem to be perplexed by them, and they will mess with them. Sometimes they'll tap on them. Sometimes they'll scratch at them. Sometimes they'll pick them up and try to figure out how to get into them and things of that nature. But most of the time, they tend to put them back. I try to keep them hidden for the most part and up at least about 8 foot high, so that humans can't reach them very easily. But they have messed with my recorders at times. I've had about 4 stolen. One was by humans. I'm sure it was humans. The other 3 times, I believe, were probably Bigfoots that took them, just because of the locations that they were in, and the fact that they weren't on any trails. There's absolutely no reason for a human to be where these LDRs or long duration recorders were. And on one occasion, the one that came up missing, I know the recorder was there on Wednesday. When we went to collect it on Sunday and take it home with us, it was gone. And there was actually about 4 or 5 small marbles left where the recorder was. I don't normally put out food for them, but I have put out things like seashells. I've put out marbles. I put out pieces of quartz. The things that I have had the most success with are the quartz and the marbles. The marbles I put out are large. They're about the size of a quarter, something like that. They're not the little small ones that we usually play with when we were small. But the one location where I put out some seashells, I put 3 on them on a moss covered log. And when I went back to change out my recorder, replace the batteries and the SD card in it, 2 of the shells were knocked off the log and were laying on the ground. The other one's still laying on the log. So I picked them up and put them back on the log. Of course, I photographed them to, make sure what order they were in and that kind of thing. When I came back to change out the recorder the next time, 2 of them were knocked off of the log and 1 of them was still sitting on the log. And of course, that could have been a possum, a coon, or anything, doing that. So, but at this point, they weren't taking any shells. So I decided to replace the shells, and I put the 3 large marbles on the log. And again, I photographed those. They were all 3 different colors, and I photographed them to make sure what color was in what order and exactly where they were sitting on the log in case something picked it up and put it back down on the log, but didn't quite get it in the same position. I could still tell if it didn't move. Well, when I came back to change out the recorder and the batteries and the SD card in it. All three of the large marbles were gone. I then put three more out there. And next time I came back, they were gone. So whatever it was that was taking them really liked the marbles, but didn't seem to care so much for the seashells.
Well, the marbles are slick and shiny and colorful, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know.
They are, and they like I said, they seem to prefer those for some reason. They do also seem to like the quartz. You know, I'll put chunks of quartz out at times, and they'll take those. What we normally do most of the time, we don't do the log thing, but most of the time we'll take a small like plastic tub about the size of something that butter may have come in at one time or something of that nature. And we will screw that into a tree, but leave it just loose enough that the thing would spin. If something like a bird or a coon or a squirrel or something tried to get on it, it would spin and throw it off. And we'll put marbles or quartz or something in that. And so far, every time that we've done that, you know, whatever we've left, where it would be quartz or the marbles or whatever, has come up missing. On one occasion, when we went back to check it, there was a bag of something that I'm not sure what it was, because the writing on this is weird. The writing on it was in Japanese. It was some type of seasoning. You could tell that. It had been ripped open and was left laying scattered there at the bottom of where we had this plastic thing with our gift items on the tree. So no idea what the intent of that was, unless it was carrying this thing around, was going to taste it or whatever, didn't like the taste of it, and just decided to discard it for the marbles and the quartz that we had left, or whether maybe in, I guess, some respect, maybe it was leaving that for us. But like I said, it had been open, it had been ripped open, and some of this, whatever it was, seasoning or whatever, was scattered there on the ground with the bag.
Any footprints around that gifting site?
Not right there. A little, well, I didn't have to mention this, but where we normally park to walk into this spot, we had found tracks before. On one occasion, we were there, and actually there was me, my son, and my youngest brother, and we had gotten out of the car and was going to be changing out the recorder, and had walked up to the area on top of this ridge, which was just over the recorder. And down below, in the hollow below, there was a loud wood knock. And then right after that, a tree broke and pushed over. You could hear it clearly. Sounded like it might have been 100 yards down below us. We could tell the general area, but due to the fact that it was summertime, there was a heavy canopy of leaves on the trees and things, so we couldn't see anything down below the tops of the trees. We were actually looking down into the tops of the trees, but we definitely heard that on that occasion. There have been other times that we've been there and we've heard knocks. As I mentioned, we've had recorders out there. It is a good location. I've gotten whoops. I've gotten, besides the knocks, I've gotten, again, clacks. I've gotten screams at times. I've gotten howls. I've also gotten what some other researchers have described it. It almost sounds like if you would take a wooden stick of some type that was hollow, or you hit a hollow log or something. It makes kind of a popping sound, or that tongue clicking that you can do with your mouth, only it was loud. You know, it was much louder than most humans are able to do. And on at least one occasion, I got the same type of response back after the first like tongue pop was made. Then a second was made a few seconds later, by another individual that was farther away, and you could tell was in a different direction. This is in the same general location as the place where we had the sighting, where there was, like I said, there's about 7 of us, and about 5 of us heard it or saw it. It's in the same general area. I'll say this, the same county, but not in exactly the same location. One of the most recent ones that I took, I won't say the location, but the gentleman that was telling me about it, I just happened to stop. I went to a tire shop to have these guys change all the tires on my car, and the owner of the shop got to talking to me and stuff, and asked me what led to me being in their area, and I told him that actually I had stopped in there once before, and I was in the area because I was doing Bigfoot research, and not knowing how he was going to take that, or if he's going to laugh at me or whatever. I asked him if he had ever heard any Bigfoot reports, and he said, he started smiling. He said, "Hey," he said, "I'll tell you why." He said, "Have you got a few minutes?" And I said, "Yeah, I can wait a few minutes." He said, "Well, I want you to talk to one of my employees." He said he really didn't believe in Bigfoot before, but he said he had an encounter that I want you to hear him describe it. So I said, okay. So I I waited about 5 minutes, and he finished up with the vehicle he's working on, and he came over, and this is a real big dude. This guy's about 6'6" and not skinny. I mean, he's broad shouldered and big chested himself. And he told me that he drove back and forth to work every day, and that he was driving down over this hill, and it was just about getting to be daylight. And as he drove down over this hill, he was driving his truck, which was jacked up. It was high. The truck is very loud. And he said he came down over this hill, and he could see something down along the creek that ran across down by at the bottom of the hill. He said that what he thought he was looking at appeared to be a tree, and he thought a tree had fallen down by the creek. But he says as he came down over this hill, the tree jumped up. And so then at that second, he realized it wasn't a tree. He said that the creature took one step, one stride, one leap, was up on the road where he was, and had basically what we call a bluff charge. It bull rushed his truck. He thought that he said that the creature was going to do one of 2 things. Either it was going to hit him, or it was going to hit his truck and roll his truck. And he said it came right up to the door of the truck. I asked, of course, what color was it, how big was it, all that kind of stuff. He said that it had to be 8 or 9 foot tall, because with the truck being jacked up, he couldn't see the face because the face extended higher than the truck. And he said for it to be that high, where the chin and all would be above the truck, he said it had to be 8 or 9 foot tall. And he said he did not get a good look at its face, because when it rushed the truck, he said he kind of ducked his head a little bit, and then he put his hands or arms up in front of his face to protect his face, because of thinking this thing was going to hit him or the truck. So he said he didn't get a clear look at the face. He drove on to work, and of course was excited, and told the rest of his friends there that worked with him what he had encountered. So I happened to ask him if he got any evidence or looked, he said, well, I didn't, because I was at work. But he said the boss, he said he went back out there to look around, and took another guy with him, and said they looked around that, and they did find a track. And I said, did you happen to cast it or anything? He said, no, we didn't have any. And the boss was standing there at this time. He said, we didn't have any casting material. We didn't have anything to measure it with. He said, we just had an ink pen. So we laid an ink pen down beside of it, which is the next best thing, because that can give a reference as to how big it is, because we could always go back and see how big that ink pen was. and then you'd have an idea how large the track was. But it was a very nice track. I saw the photo of it. The one individual had actually posted it on Facebook, so it is still on Facebook. So that was a very interesting story to hear this guy tell.
When he was driving down the road and this thing started bluff charging him, did he stop in the road? Was he stopped or was he still moving?
No, he didn't describe himself as being stopped. I think I don't want to say it frightened him, but I guess it did. He was frightened of the fact that he was going to get hit. Either this thing was going to hit him or it was going to hit his truck and roll it. So, and quite excited over what was going on, because I'm not even sure he believed in Bigfoot up to that point. I would describe him as probably at least being skeptical as to whether or not it was real. So no, he didn't describe it as stopping. He drove on to work and told the rest of his friends, what he had witnessed.
Now, when they bluff charged, did he bluff charging from the front? Was the Bigfoot in the middle of the road, or was he coming up from the side?
From the side, yeah. Okay. Yeah, from up to the driver's door. If it had been standing back a little ways, he would have been able to see the head, but because of the fact that it came right up to the door, that precluded it from being able to see the face at a close distance, because it extended beyond the top of the truck or out the window, extended beyond the top of the window where he could see. I've taken several reports and interviewed several people over the years. One of the other individuals, this was actually on one of the TV shows that was on maybe a couple of years ago or something like that. A guy who's actually now a good friend of mine. He had made a report that I'll say that he was down in Pike County, Ohio, and had his dog. He had actually taken his daughter to a camp, and I won't say the name of the camp because I want to kind of protect the camp, protect their anonymity. So he had taken his daughter to camp, left the camp. He was driving cross country because he likes to bird watch, and he also collects sticks to make like walking sticks out of and that kind of stuff. So he's cutting across country, and he has a dog that he usually takes with him about every place he goes. And this dog, he got out of the car. His intent was that the dog was going to get out of the car, and they was going to just walk around. And he had parked at the top of this ridge, and he was going to look down over the ridge, down this trail, what I'll describe as kind of be like an old fire road. He was going to look down it to see what was down toward the other end, down toward the hollow. And he tried to get the dog out. The dog wouldn't get out of the car, no matter what he did. And he said the dog never, ever turned down an opportunity to get out of the car with him. Dog went everywhere that he went. Dog just never refused to get out of the car before, but dog would not get out of the car on this occasion. So he walked over to look down over this fire road. And as he was looking down the fire road as to what was down below, the road it goes down a hill and kind of curves, so you can't see around the curve and stuff. He said he started to turn around to walk back to his car, and as he kind of took one step to the right to turn back toward the car, his right to turn back toward the car, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Well, he turned his head back. He stopped, turned his head back around, and as he did, what appeared to be what he thought was a decaying tree, and I will say I would guess that it to be about 50 yards, something like that, down this fire road. It moved. So then he realized that this is not a tree that I'm looking at. But he described it as that time kind of being like the bark of a tree. That he said the hair was very matted. He could only see it. It was standing in weeds that came up to about its thigh, so he couldn't see the lower legs. He could see it from the thigh up. Uh, this thing had been standing there the whole time he was looking down the road, and he didn't realize that it was Bigfoot. He thought it was a tree. And he said that, so again, it was holding quite still, as I described in the earlier story. But when he turned, evidently this thing felt it was safe to turn also to walk then into the tree line or the brush line that was just off of the road. So he actually was able to watch it for a few seconds as it moved from the side of the road into this tree line or the brush line. And then it just quickly disappeared within the brush line because the collar of the hair just so closely resembled the color of the brush at the side of the road, being kind of a gray with a tan built in and that kind of thing. But he watched this thing disappear within the brush line there at the side of the road. And like I said, that he was actually interviewed on TV later after this TV station found out about the report and so forth. And it is published in our BFRO public database or webpage that the BFRO keeps.
Any smells or anything unusual otherwise?
I'm trying to remember. I don't remember what I know. I asked him that, and it would be in the report on the BFRO site. But I don't remember in this case. I've done so many interviews and stuff that I just don't remember whether he described the smell at that time or not. But somehow that dog was able to evidently sense that it was not a safe place for that dog to get out of the car. And that dog couldn't have seen it because this thing was down the hill, like I said, about 50 yards or so down over the side of that ridge, and that dog was parked back away from the edge of the ridge. So somehow that dog was able to sense that there was something there that was dangerous.
Have you ever taken a report where someone was hurt or they were really felt like they were in a dangerous situation?
I have had reports where individuals thought that they were surrounded. A guy who is a friend of mine who actually was one of the members of the 8 group that I mentioned earlier, APE. He was one of the researchers with it. He was actually hit in the back of the neck or the back of the head with what I would describe as either being a small tree or a large or like a branch from the tree. And he got his neck broken and was in the hospital. He felt certain there was Bigfoot activity taking place on their property. That's without a doubt. There was a lot of times they were leaving little gifts for him that he would find when he got up in the morning. And he was out actually cutting down some trees on his property. And he did, unbeknownst to him at the time, but as he found out later, there was what appeared to be a nest close to the tree that he was cutting down. And whether this angered an adult, whether there had, like I said, there was a nest there, whether they were keeping a small one in the nest, whatever, he couldn't answer that part. But whatever, he got hit in the back of the head with this branch or with this tree, and it actually knocked him out. And then he had to be taken to the hospital, and they discovered that he had a broken neck, and he had his neck in one of those neck collars for a while. So now whether the thing was trying to hurt him or just trying to scare him away from what he thought was a nest, I can't actually say, but and he couldn't either. But it was trying to ward him off, I'm sure, from that area. We don't know if it meant to hit him or whether it was just trying to come close, but it did, in fact, hit him.
Well, you said that there were Bigfoot on their property. Do you know if that was ongoing? Did they have any other interactions with
Yeah, there was a lot of different things, tracks, vocals, different things going on. And matter of fact, they would hike down off of this. I'll call it a mountain. It wasn't in Ohio. it was actually in New York, in the Adirondacks. These clan of Bigfoots would come down off of the top of the mountain where it went to stay at night, it appeared, from their research, and would come down, and they seemed to stay around this lake during the daytime. And then at night, just like clockwork, they would make their way and go basically up and down the same way, every day, back up to the top of this mountain again. And these people had gotten not only vocals, but they've got tracks, they got eye shine. These things would leave gifts for them, both the man and the woman. They would leave the woman certain things and leave the man other things. They would see him out working a lot, so they would leave him things that I think they felt that he could use in his work. They had some hair that appeared to have come from a horse, and it was actually tied kind of like in a bow. And the nearest horse was like a mile and a half away down the road from their property. So there's no way that it got dropped off by the horse or got tied in this bow by the horse. Something obviously left it there. Yeah, he was gifting both the wife things and the male other things. Like I said, the male was being left things of a tool nature, like if you would lose, or somebody lose a screwdriver or a ratchet, if somebody lost a nut or a screw or something like that, they was constantly leaving these type items for him. They would leave her things like this, tied horsehair. They left her, I think it was half of, I can't remember, I think it was a squirrel, that they left her a half a squirrel at one time. They also tried to, he had a tarp tied down over like a well or a cistern type thing, and they had removed the tarp from this well or cistern. And that, on other occasions, you ask if any individuals have been hurt or anything threatened in any way like that. There have been times that we've had rocks thrown at us. The one place that I was describing earlier, where we'd heard the loud knock and a tree knocked down, and we'd gotten audio, we gifted these things and stuff. There was one time me and my son was there, and we were again changing the batteries and the SD card. My son, I could hear, I didn't see it. There was a rock whizzed past him, and I could actually hear this thing whizzing through the air. And then my son hollered at me and said, "Dad, did you throw a rock at me?" And I said, "No, I did not throw a rock at you." But I said, I heard it. I said, I heard it whiz. I heard it hit when it hit. And then one of the things that I always do when I get out, I have a GoPro that I put on my head, and I always turn it on before we get outside the car. And my son carries a recorder that he turns on, and the GoPro picked it up. You could hear the rock whizzing through the air and then hitting in the brush. So, I don't know if it meant to hit him, whether it's just trying to scare him away, whether it's just trying to get his reaction and see what he would do. I don't know, but there have been other times that we've had like small walnuts, acorns thrown at us, small rocks. Usually if they're doing that, a lot of times they're just kind of lobbing them. So I don't think it's any intent to hurt us. They have hit us with the acorns before. It hasn't hurt. It didn't throw it hard. It was a small one, not very big, about the size of a nickel or so. Um, they were just doing that to get our reaction and have some fun. Uh, when they mean business and they want you to leave, then they'll throw larger rocks and they throw them harder. And if that happens, it's best to leave. Yeah, at that point, know that they don't want you there. They're not playing around. They want you to go and leave their area, and it's best then at that point to leave. I have never personally seen an orb connected with a Bigfoot. Some of my close friends have. I've been on camping trips, especially in northern part of Kentucky with Tom Shea's group, where individuals, while I was there, happened to see orbs or glowing lights or shining lights and things of that nature. I did not see them. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean they wasn't there. One of my close friends, I'll call him one of my best friends, is an individual that camps with us down there, and he has had the experience of seeing some of those glowing lights or shining lights while we were there. And then there's another story that he can tell that's just fascinating out of a park in Indiana where he witnessed some glowing lights. But we went back there because he wanted to show me this place. We were at this park, and so this individual's name was John, and there's another close friend of ours named Keith and his wife Mary, and we were camping out this place after a Crypticon in Kentucky, and so John wanted us to see where this place where these light things had taken place. So we went over there. Well, we had our cars loaded down because of having been to Crypticon, and we didn't. I didn't want to go off and leave all these electronics that we had with us because we had thousands of dollars worth of electronics. I didn't want to leave them there at our base camp and go up on this high mountain where these lights had taken place. He had taken me up there earlier. These guys were going to go up there and set up a parabolic microphone and try to record some audio. So they went up there and they said, "You don't mind staying here by yourself?" "Oh no, I'll stay here by myself. That's fine." And so the tree line was, I would say, maybe 10 feet in front of me. I was sitting underneath a canopy in a recliner, one of those gravity recliners. We had gotten 2 pizzas earlier to share between the 4 of us, and we had pizza left over. We didn't eat it all. So we combined it all into one box, left it on a picnic table. There was 2 picnic tables. They were about 10 feet behind me. One had this pizza box on it. The other one had some items to make coffee and that kind of stuff sitting on. And the 2 picnic tables were about 10 feet apart. Well, as I was sitting there, I had my thermal, I had a can of bear spray, and I had a white spotlight. And also, besides having a red headlamp on my head that I always wear. Well, as I was sitting there, I started to get a little drowsy, but I hadn't fallen asleep or anything like that. And all of a sudden, I heard a thud coming from the direction of the picnic table behind me, and it had been to my left, over my left shoulder. I immediately got up. I turned on the spotlight, started shining it toward the table, and I saw that the pizza box was gone. So I started walking back in that direction, shining the light as I went. There's nothing behind me except for open grass and an occasional tree here or there. But for probably, I would say 300 yards, it was just clear open grass. The tree line, again, was in front of me. So I walked back toward the picnic table. I did find the pizza box about 10 feet away from the picnic table. It didn't have any teeth marks in it. It didn't have any claw marks in it. It had simply been dropped there on the ground. I picked up the pizza box and I thought, well, that's strange. For one thing, where did the individual go that had taken off with this pizza box? And you know, what happened to it, because like I said, it was just wide open grass. There's no way anything in the world could have gotten away that quickly that I couldn't have shined that light on it. So I walked on back. I took the pizza box, I threw it in the fire, the campfire. It was still going, and I sat back down in the chair. But this time I'm a little leery because now I know that there's something. I don't know what, but there's something in that woods or in base camp besides just me. I sat back down in that chair. I have the can of bear spray like this, the white spotlight like this, and I've got the thermal laying on my lap. Well, I sit there, and probably about 10 minutes or so went by, and I heard kind of another thump. And this was coming from the other picnic table that was directly behind me. This time I'm ready because I got my hand on the trigger of the spotlight. I whirl around as soon as I heard that. I shine the spotlight. Don't see anything again. Nothing in the spotlight. I'm moving the spotlight all around. I shine it up in the tree. Nothing. There's nothing there. So I get up and I walk back to that table to figure out, what had been moved or bumped or whatever. Well, there was what I'll describe as a cloth like tote bag that some ladies might use if they were shopping or something of that nature. And it's laying over maybe about 8 feet or so away from the picnic table. So I walk over, I pick it up, and I start walking back to the picnic table with it. And I thought, well, no, that's strange. Why would anything pick up this tote bag and take off with it? So I lay it back down on the picnic table. A little while later, my friends came back from having been up on top of that mountain. And they come back, and, I'm telling them about what happened. I'm saying, look, it's crazy, but something has been in this base camp with me. And it is so fast that by the time I shine the spot, and I'm talking literally 1 or 2 seconds, I said, it is already out of sight. And there's, like I said, just wide open behind me. And my spotlight will shine. I mean, my goodness, it'll shine 100 yards or more. And how anything could have got away that quickly, I have no idea. But in describing this story to them, I tell them about this tote bag. And I said, I have no idea why something would pick up that tote bag and take off with an empty tote bag. And Mary spoke up and said, well, that tote bag wasn't empty. It had a loaf of bread in it. And I said, well, there's no loaf of bread. When I picked up that tote bag, it was laying there flat and no loaf of bread to be found anywhere. And we got up the next morning again early, and we're looking around for any kind of tracks. We look for remnants of a tote or of a bag of bread, whether that be the plastic that was around the loaf of bread, whether it was the bread or crust laid around. There was nothing. No sign of bread, no sign of plastic. And I honest to God can't begin to tell you what it was that took off of that pizza and took off of that tote bag with the loaf of bread in it, but something did, and it had to be strong enough that it could have picked up each of those things. It didn't leave any teeth marks or claw marks in the pizza box. It took off of that loaf of bread without. If it had been a coon or something like that, it would have ripped it open and started eating it before it. There's just no way a coon could have got away with a loaf of bread, dragging that thing fast enough that I wouldn't have been able to get the light on it. But I'm telling you, that park is weird.
Did they see any lights when they went up to the place where they'd seen lights before?
That night they did not. They didn't see any lights. They weren't having any activity. That's one of the reasons they came back. They didn't have any activity. But like I said, my buddy could tell you a good story of what they did see with the lights and stuff, what transpired up on top of that mountain. I actually started out with another group that was called APE, is American Primate Exploration Group, led by Dan Baker. And I started out as an investigator with those guys. I'd been interested in Bigfooting for years and read everything that I could and watched every film that I could on the thing. But then I got an invitation or an offer to join Dan's group, so I did. It was shortly thereafter, Dan became ill and was no longer able to lead the group. So at that time, the BFRO asked me if I would like to become a member of the BFRO. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I knew I was going to have to find somebody to squatch with at that point. So I joined the BFRO and have been with them ever since. It is the Ohio group that I'm most active with. I was just fascinated with it from the time I was a little kid. Of course, hearing about the abominable snowman and Yeti and things like that. And then, of course, the Patterson-Gimlin film. I of course watched that, and then I began seeing articles in the paper. Sometimes there'd be reports made into the paper by a gentleman who was an early researcher in Ohio by the name of Ron Schaffner. Also, Don Keating, who actually got the Ohio Bigfoot Conference started. Don also did a lot of the early research in Ohio that was going on. Periodically, I'd see an article put in a newspaper that one of those gentlemen had done, reported to the newspaper. And that was when I first began to realize that they were even in Ohio, which was a shock to me because being a young kid, I didn't realize that. I didn't know anyone around my area who had had any sightings or anything. There weren't as many books out at that time, and those that were out weren't easily to obtain because we didn't have the internet and computers and things like that. So I always watched. We didn't even have a library in the town that I grew up in, but we had a bookmobile that would come to our school periodically. So I always watched for the occasional Bigfoot book that may be in one of those bookmobiles and would latch onto it when I could and read that with great enthusiasm and any magazine articles, things of that nature. But once I learned that they were in Ohio, it wasn't long before I started attending the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, and I heard some of the speakers there talk about having sightings in Ohio and some of the research going on in Ohio, and I was just fascinated with that. And then, of course, after that, began going every year. I never missed it because I wanted to hear these other speakers speak about their research and stuff. And so once I began to learn how to do research properly and things of that nature, I began doing my own research as to where some of these creatures might be located, where I could find them and things like that. And I've had a lot of success in finding where different Bigfoot individuals or clans might be located, and have put, like I said, I put out the long duration recorders in some of those areas. I look for tracks. If we find tracks, we cast them. Right now, I would say we have probably in the neighborhood of about 70 casts, either foot tracks, hand tracks, or handprints. We've gotten some what appears to be fists down in mud. We have hair that appears to be Bigfoot hair. Just a variety of different forms of what we consider to be evidence.
Well, what would you advise someone if they were going to go out and do some Bigfoot research?
One of the things that I would advise them to do first is either hook up with somebody that's reputable that either leads an expedition, or somebody that they can hook up with that is reputable and is knowledgeable to kind of show them the ropes. In other words, don't just go out by yourself. One of the other things I would highly recommend is, don't go hiking by yourself. Hook up with somebody. You never can tell. I mean, you could fall, you could break an ankle or something like that and need someone to go get help. I mean, many times there are things that could happen that don't even involve Bigfoot, and you might need somebody there to give you assistance or get help. So don't go by yourself. Go with somebody. Take somebody with you. I would go well prepared. I would check into what items do you need to take with you. One of the things I would recommend is some type of hiking stick. Those are good for a lot of things. You can move spider webs off the trails. You can move snakes aside should you come across one of them. Just a good hiking stick comes into a use for a lot of different things. So I would suggest taking a hiking stick, things like first aid kit, things like that you want to have available. A good GPS unit is advisable and good to have with you. You might take a walkie-talkie. We use those when we go out on expeditions and night ops. Do a lot of good research. Go hear some of the reputable speakers talk. A lot of times, several times a year, I do talks like at libraries and things like that. The last one that I did a talk on how to find your own research area, how to start, what research to do before you even go to the forest to determine a good active spot. So attend some of the reputable researchers' talks. Most of them are really great about answering questions. And if you want to contact them via email, Facebook, text, whatever, some of them are good about giving out that information so that you can contact them. If you don't feel comfortable talking in front of a crowd at a say a library talk or something like that, many times you can contact them in private, and they'll be glad to answer your questions and things like that nature. Don't expect them to give up their favorite research spots, because most of them won't do that, but they may help you find your own and get you started in how to do research, what to take with you, things of that nature. I will say this, that when we have our expeditions, we have speakers. Usually it's one or two a night. Every night we have at least one speaker. I've had people speak on audio, how to do that, how to build one of these recorders. They'll play audio for you that they've captured. Usually Jack and Dr. Kenny Brown are the ones that do that for me. I've had Lori Russell do a talk on what to put in a pack to take out with you. Chris Locke this time is going to be doing one on first aid, like in the woods or forest, or if you're on an expedition. My son Wes usually does a talk on how to cast tracks and how to properly retrieve those and document those. I've had Brad Kennan and Dr. Russ Jones come before, and they will talk about reports and stories that they've investigated or researched before. Those are some of the ones that jump out at me as far as what some of the talks that we've had. I always do one on night ops and our procedure for doing that, so that if we do have new individuals that come for the first time, before we go out, they know what's expected of them and what to expect of us in return when we've got them out in the forest after dark. I took part in a couple of the BFRO ones before I began before I became the leader, the organizer of them. And then I've done several since that time, myself led them. I've been on other folks' expeditions also. I've been on many of Charlie Raymond's, who's a BFRO investigator out of Kentucky. I've been on several of the campouts or small expeditions that Tom Shea with the Northern Kentucky group have had. Like I said, I lead 2 a year here in Ohio with BFRO. Normally, I cut it off at about 40 people. I just feel that's the most that we're able to take out and have much success, and also keep people safe and stuff. We put out recorders when we're on those expeditions. We have what we call night ops, where we split up into teams. So many people say, well, you can't go out and find Bigfoot or anything with 40 people tromping through the woods. We don't take 40 people tromping through the woods. We split up into what we call night ops teams, which consist of usually about 5 to 7 people per team. Each of those teams, at least as far as the expeditions that I run, have two experienced BFRO investigators that lead the team. They then take the other individuals out to a location that we believe that there has been Bigfoot activity, whether that be vocalizations, found tracks, sightings, whatever. Usually we drive within a reasonable distance of the spot that we're going to. And then a lot of times we'll walk or hike in depending upon ability. And then sometimes we'll maybe set out a camp chair or something of that nature and use night vision or thermal or so forth to keep a watch. And we do put people on teams based upon their ability, or if they have wishes that they would like to go with such and such a person in a group or things of that nature. I try to honor those requests. We always leave 2 people at base camp, at least 2, to one, guard our base camp and then make sure nothing's stolen. But also there's a lot of activity that takes place in our base camp. We have had them come into our base camp before on several occasions. We've had one night I'm thinking about, we had at least 4 sets of handprints and fingerprints left on the windows of our vehicles. One time it rained a little bit and we got some tracks right at the side of what we call our command post, which is actually like a double or 2 canopies put together. That's where we put like an 8-foot folding table. That's where our speakers speak from, things of that nature. But this individual was standing right there at our command post. I'm usually the last one to go to bed. I want to make sure everybody's all tucked in, safe and sound and everything. And I watch for lights to go off in tents and things of that nature. One night I got in my tent, and within 10 minutes of turning off the light in my tent, I could hear something bump or move one of our camp chairs, which was only sitting maybe 10 feet from my tent. It was actually in front of the command post, but something bumped one of those chairs and moved it. Trying to think of other occasions. Oh, on one occasion, we had one individual hurt. Well, at least a couple of times we've had individuals hear something walking outside their tent late at night after everybody was in bed. On one occasion, we had an individual who felt certain that they thought it was a Bigfoot, had put their hand, this is a tall individual, and they were pressed up against the side of their tent, and they felt a hand push their body in about 4 inches inside, through the tent wall of the tent. So they do, that's also one of the locations where I had the recorder stolen and the marbles left in its place. We found, tracks there before, just a lot of various types of evidence besides, great audio.